Hi, I'm Jennifer Hathaway, and I'm joining you to share a little bit of information about the new New York State Science Standards, the new assessments, which will be given for the first time in fifth and eighth grade this year, this spring. And then I have information to share about the new investigations for the elementary and middle school level as well. So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of information about my background, but wanted to give you a little bit of information so that you know where I'm coming from. I am currently teaching seventh grade science, but I have taught at the high school level, sixth grade, and then I've also run lots of different summer programs with the elementary age students. However, I've never been in an elementary classroom, so everything that I suggest or make reference to in this video. If you have suggestions, if you're an elementary teacher or any other grade level, if you have tips, tricks, any information to add, I would greatly appreciate it. I feel that we all can be our best selves when we collaborate and work together to improve our instruction. So, about 6 years ago, I started attending state level conferences as a representative of BOCES and learned a lot about the new standards and implementation at different grade levels. So this is kind of a summary of what I've learned. And before I jump into content, I just wanted to let you know that video skills are not my forte, and I probably need to collaborate with some 20-something and get a little lesson in creating videos for teachers, but I'm doing my best. I like to just keep rolling if I make mistakes because I don't like to have to record or edit. It's really time consuming, so I'd prefer not to do that if possible. So I apologize ahead of time. Just fast forward if you get bored with me or if you want to move to different sections in the video. So I always feel like I'm Sheldon Cooper on his show Fun with Flags because I might be having a great time talking about science, but I feel like nobody's out there really watching. So it's really difficult to do sessions like this through video because you're not out there asking questions and I don't know what to clarify further or if I'm missing something. So that's why I want to point out to you that I have my my email posted right here at the bottom. So you can use that email. If you click on my name, that's a link to my resume if you want a little bit more information about who I am and my past experience. And then throughout this whole slideshow, there's a ton of different links and information. So like I said, if you want a copy of something in particular, or if you want to discuss it in more detail, feel free to reach out to me. So I'm going to be moving my video around a bit just to make sure I'm not covering things on the slide. So I apologize ahead of time for that. And as you can see, I'm going to be jumping all over the place. So if this bothers you, I apologize. Okay. So we're going to start with kind of a background in the standards. Like I said, I'm not going into anything in a huge amount of detail because I want to make this video relatively efficient and make sure that you're getting an overview of the things that I feel are most important. So down here in the bottom box, standards and schedules, everything that's underlined is a link and will take you to a page with more information. So for standards and schedules, if you click this first link, it takes you to that full 80-page document. I'm not going to open that, but it takes you to the full 80-page document, a PDF of the New York State Science Learning Standards. So those are, listed in the PDF. They're sequential by grade. So if you haven't looked at those standards before, even if you have curriculum that you purchase for your grade level, it's a great idea to kind of look at those standards and get a general idea of how they're structured and what the expectations are. Now, for some people, the standards are a little bit overwhelming. So I created this document that has little pop-out boxes with more information about the standards. So the other standards looked very different than these. So it would take a lot of time, I guess, to kind of really ground yourself and understand what you're looking at with these new standards. At least it did for me when I first started looking at these standards. So these little pop-out boxes will give you more information about what's on this page. So if you want just a really quick overview of what's going on at your grade level, I would recommend that you look at these top objectives or things that students need to understand for this topic. And then this orange box is going to give you an overview or like a content checklist of what you need to teach. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail right now about the structure of this page. I could talk for probably 40 minutes about it, but I want to just highlight a couple things. So the blue, the orange, and the green, that is all linked to 3D learning, which I'll talk about in a minute. But if you want more information on that or would like to understand these standards and organization more, reach out to me and I can do a separate video for you. I can visit your school. We can do a video chat and just discuss it. I love to help new teachers kind of become familiar with these standards and begin with implementation. So on the couple things I wanted to point out here is underneath these standards, a lot of teachers miss this because it's really fine print. It's not colored. It doesn't stand out, but these are connections to similar standards at other grade levels. So if you're really struggling to find time to teach science, this is a great way to loop in with other grade levels and maybe prep some experiments together that have the same content. Or if you're doing like a big buddy program and you want to do the same science lesson with multiple grade levels, or a lesson that's similar and then the takebacks to your classroom could be different. This tells you, so this is a 4th grade page, and here you can see that it's got 2nd grade standards listed, middle school standards, a 3rd grade standard. So there's all of those standards at other grade levels are similar content to this page. So it shows you where those crossover pieces are. Also down here on the bottom, if you're really looking to weave science into some of your ELA and math lessons, this shows you exactly which standards in ELA and math link with this particular science standard. So I didn't notice that when I first started looking at these standards, but that page is really helpful. Okay, moving on. So New York State Science Assessment Update. So if you click on this page, it's going to take you to the New York State Education Department page dedicated to science. So this page has become much more organized in the last couple years, and it's fairly user-friendly. I mean, there's a menu on the left and there's a lot of information here. However, I will say that like this link that I provided for you has all of the most recent updates. So every time the state releases information to your administration or to your director of instruction, any information they're getting from the state is going to be posted to this page. So I linked this page specifically because it's the most used page. However, there's a lot more information in here. And if you're looking for something specific and you need help finding it, please let me know and I'll be happy to send you the direct link. I am pretty familiar with that page, so I can help you out. The next thing that I want to talk about, and this is going to make you probably, it's one of those things where you're going to want to stop the video and go look at it and then come back to the video maybe. So this is a question sampler, and I know a lot of teachers have reached out to me about this. So the new tests, the new assessments for 5th and 8th grade are no longer paper-based, they are computer-based. And that is definitely a change and something that students will need time to adjust to. So the cool thing about this link is you can have students use this link and go to this page. You can select your content area. If we select science, you can select your grade level and you can select the test. So there's different samples you can try. So if I pick sampler 1, it will provide an answer key for you. But if you hit start test, it actually gives students instructions as they would see them during the state test. So it allows them to kind of go through the motion of what the state test is going to look like and practice ahead of time so they're familiar with it, and then it isn't as overwhelming and they know what tools. I, as a teacher, always encourage my students to draw and write and highlight. And so as a teacher, knowing what these test tools are, the fact that they can highlight, they can use a line reader to help isolate things so they can focus, having all of those, knowing what tools they are and being able to look at this ahead of time is awesome. And then they can actually practice some of the questions that could be similar to questions that will be on the new assessment. So there's not a lot of questions here, but I feel like this is something I definitely will use in my classroom, and this is huge. And the link is right there for you, question sampler, so you can use that at any time. Okay, the new test timeline, I feel like everybody's seen this at this point. We know when the tests are coming out. So 5th and 8th grade is this spring in 2024. And then next year, we're going to have biology and earth science. Those Regents exams are going to be new in the spring of 2025, and then chem and physics in 2026. So if you are a high school teacher, I know that you have probably been hesitant to move forward with these new standards because the Regents exam didn't change. But if you're finding now that you'd like to move forward, look at new curriculum, or really explore what these new standards, the new teaching methods that are being suggested for these new standards, let me know, and I can link you up with some people that focus on high school level PD, or I can offer you some different resources that I've put together specifically for high school teachers. So next is the standard summary chart. So this is one of my most requested documents of all the things that I have. So John Fermonte from Lake Placid actually put this together for me during a PD session. But with the elementary level especially, if you want to know just a snapshot of the major units in your grade level, it would be a lot of flipping through that 80-page document. So this has it all on one page for you. So if you're trying to develop a scope and sequence throughout your school year, or if you're working with other grade levels, if you want to see, okay, what do I teach now and what are the new units? This is just a really quick reference page, and it gives it all to you on one page. So this definitely is not the detail you need to design lessons and go in depth, but it's a quick snapshot and definitely something that I would print if I was teaching elementary, just as a, guide for me. All right. The last link that I have here is for 3D learning. So if you are in middle school or high school, this is something that you probably want to look at a little bit more closely, because most of us in middle and high school do not use pre-built curriculum. So we don't have curriculum kits. We're designing our own lessons. So it would be beneficial to look at this page and read through these different dimensions and how the standards are organized and some of the teaching practices that are recommended, because it is quite a shift. I taught biology for 15 years. And the lessons, or the PD I've been to at the state level, specifically focused on high school lessons, it's quite a shift in thinking and quite a shift in lesson design, as far as what's recommended to prepare students for these new Regents exams. So this site is a real quick overview of the 3 dimensions. And there's also lots of different links here with lesson design information. So that could be really beneficial to you, especially at middle and high school. Okay, so the next thing I want to go to, because it's kind of the top item. So if you're not wanting to watch this whole video, this is on investigations. I wanted to share those links with you quick. So we're going to go through these investigation links, and then I'm going to jump into the new assessments and talk a little bit about what I'm anticipating the questions to look like on the new assessments and my tips for preparing your students for those new assessments. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about unit plan resources and some school-wide initiatives that will help really increase test scores across your district, if that's something that is a goal that your school is working towards. And at the very end, I'm going to share my website up here and then some shared resources that I will have from other teachers in our region. So back to the New York State Science investigations. So the first thing I have for you is a supply list. So if we're not able to order kits, or if you need to put your own kits together, Pam Pelkey from Davis Elementary in Malone, she helped create this chart with me. But we have all of the labs at the elementary level here, and we have a list saying how many of each supply you need. So New York State and the labs that they released, all of this information is there, but it's not all in one organized chart like this. So we thought that this was helpful to have. And then it tells you if it's something that you would need to purchase yearly, or is something that once you put it in your kit, you're good. And then this is the list for the middle school station. So Weather has no supplies, but the other 3 have supplies that you'll need to order. I've ordered all of the supplies for my middle school. So if you have questions about specific things that need to be ordered and you're not sure what they're meaning, let me know and I can help you out with that a little bit. And then for the elementary, I actually have kits put together. And so if you're wanting to see what one looks like, let me know and I can send you pictures of those kits. I've been working for a while on getting this presentation together, but I'll be adding things throughout the year as I do more work. My goal is to put pictures of the kits into this chart and make it even a better resource for teachers. Okay, so the next thing that I have to share is a test info slideshow. So I put this together last spring, and a lot of teachers were reaching out with different questions regarding assessments and investigations. So what I did was put some top requested links here for you. And then these are the most like frequently asked questions from teachers in our region. So I tried to put it like those answers on a couple slides so that I didn't, so I could share it quick to teachers. This is a bit outdated as far as spring 2023 is already over, but this was my suggestion for how those labs be rolled out. And if you did not start those labs last year, don't panic. You're going to have to adjust this a little bit, but this was my suggestion. So if you need a new schedule for this year, or if you're not quite sure how to organize that, reach out and I can help you with a plan that's going to work for your school. Okay, and then this is that computer-based link again, where students can test, get practice with a computer-based testing. Again, these are just it's information that I gathered when I was at state level meetings, and I was like, oh, teachers may need to know this. So just some new vocabulary. Every time we have new standards, new assessments, new whatever, there's jargon that goes with it, right? We love the jargon. The acronyms, it gets really frustrating. But so a couple words I heard that normally isn't part of my vocabulary when I'm talking about assessments with students. So one thing is called clusters. They kept saying clusters of questions. So typically before on state tests, the questions are one at a time. And if you teach middle or high school, you know that the Regents exam and the 8th grade exam usually, especially in parts B, C, and D, the questions are organized by theme, or there's a whole page with this a question about food webs, for example, or a whole section on weather. So they're calling these sections of themed questions clusters. Okay, so if you hear that term anywhere, that's what they're talking about. Next is stimuli. So anytime there's an image, a graph, or any visual for students to use to answer questions, it's called stimuli. And then the last thing that's a really important point here, and we're going to talk about it more a little bit later in this video, is that students are going to be required to look at real data. So a lot of times I feel like, especially at the elementary level, even in my middle school class, when I'm presenting data to students and we haven't talked about graphs before, we haven't really analyzed data, I try to keep the data pretty neat, right? If you're giving them a line graph, you're going to use one that's got a straight line to talk about trends, like this is increase, this is decrease, this means stay the same, right? So you're going to start really simply, and you're not going to give them data where like it goes up and then down and then up again, because you want them to get gain a basic understanding first. So you're really going to want to move on from that though throughout your school year, because on this new state exams, both at 5th and at 8th grade, students are going to be exposed to real data where it's going to go up and down, and they're going to have to see an overall trend in that data. And so if it's more up than down, they'll need to be able to say, okay, at this date or this point, it's an increase, and at this point, it's a decrease. So I'll show you some examples of that later in the video, but that's something that's fairly new. And the last thing is that the following vocabulary is going to be used very often, and students should be very familiar with it. And that's claim, factor, and evidence. And so as we go through some sample questions, and as you maybe do some of this work on your own, outside of this video, you're going to see those words pop up a lot. So it's something you want to kind of make note of and use more frequently in your classes. Okay, the next thing I have for you, so those investigations, I'm guessing you all have copies of those now, that were your administrator in your building had to get access to those for you, but I have mine in Google folders. So I've shared the link with you. So this is my Google Drive, but I've just shared it. And so each lab is here. And if you wanted to copy that, it's just all there and organized for you, rather than if you have it somewhere else that's not as easy to access. I just provided the links for you. Okay, and the last thing here, there's no link at this time, but there will be very soon. So in August, I'm doing a PD session with some teachers local to where I'm located, and they are going to be going through some of the investigations. And so I'm going to ask them to help me out because, like I said, I'm not in an elementary classroom. And I'm one teacher in a middle school classroom. And so I love when people can collaborate and put ideas together. So I'm going to ask them to share with me their tips and tricks for getting through these investigations. So I taught all mixed up in middle school, and I taught the Cool It Lab this year. And both of those, it was a huge learning curve. There are things that I'll do much differently next year when I teach them. And so I feel like I could definitely put together a tips and tricks page for both of those. But I don't really, until you teach it, it's difficult. Or, if you're a second grade teacher, what second graders are going to struggle with, or third graders or fourth graders. So I'm really hoping those teachers I work with are going to have some great information to share. And when I get that all put on pages for each lab, I will link that here for you. So keep checking back and I will add that. I'm sharing this with you as a published website instead of a Google slideshow, because if it's a published website, every time you click the link, it's going to give you the most recent update of it. So my video will, it's like I'm saying this isn't linked, and the next time you come see it, it might actually be linked. But the slideshow, as I make updates and as I make improvements, I will constantly update the slideshow. So keep checking back. Okay, so if you don't feel like you need information about the assessments, or if you want to come back and do the rest of this video later, the next thing we're jumping into is assessments, and that's going to take me about 15-20 minutes. And then we'll end with unit plan resources, and again, another 15 or 20 minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you don't plan to watch any more of this video, and check out my website, that's got a lot of information. And then you can click this link too, and it will have more information as well. Okay, so moving on to assessments. So I've done a lot of research I started this work with assessments probably 4 years ago. And at that time, New York State hadn't released any sample questions. We had no idea what these videos. We had no idea what these questions were going to look like. I can't get my video to go where I want it to go. I guess it's staying there. Okay. So we didn't know what these questions were going to look like on this new assessment. And I don't know about all of you, but I like to plan ahead, and not being able to look ahead to what those questions might be was a little bit stressful. So there are New York State based these new assessments on their standards on NGSS standards, which are national standards. So there are other states that are ahead of New York State as far as assessments are concerned. So if you look over here on this box, you'll see like Delaware, Wisconsin. The reason I did that and don't have New York links is because they're ahead of us. And I've pulled some sample questions from those states that I thought would mirror closely what New York State questions might look like. And when I saw the sample questions come out about a year ago now from New York State, I was like, phew, because I had no idea. I was just guessing. And those questions, the sample ones, match pretty closely with what I was anticipating. So a lot of these links, if you really wanted to get an idea of what some questions might be beyond what New York State has shared, these links will give you some help with that. So I want to just kind of break down or talk about the differences between the old assessment questions and the new assessment questions. So I'm going to start with an old test. So this is the past of assessments. And I said to start on page 23. So we're going to talk about this first, and then I'm going to move to the new assessments and we'll compare. So this question is about skunks. On the new one that was shared from New York State, it's about beavers. But it says skunks can spray a liquid with very strong odor. Identify one sense that could be affected when an animal gets sprayed by a skunk. So really, it's a test of, do students know their senses? Like, what is a sense? And can they describe how it might be affected? Okay. Question 41, skunks also have sharp claws. Describe one way a skunk's claws can help it to survive. All right. So it's a question kind of about adaptations. Then we move down to the next page, and this is a separate question, right? It's not all part of the same cluster, as they're calling it. And this question bank or page is about the pond ecosystem. And so they're wanting students to understand a little bit probably about food webs and about how different species within this food web would interact with each other within this ecosystem. So it says identify 2 organisms labeled that are producers. So that's really just a memorization question. Students have to have memorized that plants are producers, and they have to be able to name 2 from the diagram that are producers. So like water plants, pine tree. Okay, those are the 2 that pop out. Oh, there's grass there too. Okay, and then it says identify one source of energy for all the organisms in this pond environment. So again, this is a memorization question. They have to remember that the sun is always a source of energy for any ecosystem. Okay. And then the next page, the average lifespan of one animal is 10 years. Explain what is meant by lifespan. And describe 2 reasons why. That's just a vocabulary question, right? 44. And then 45, describe 2 reasons why an animal might move from one area to live in another area. To me, that's a very open-ended question. If I was giving this question, I feel like even in middle school, I would get, and again, this is 4th grade, I would get students saying totally random stuff because there's no data to look at, there's no picture, there's nothing to kind of spark their thinking. And so, why might an animal move from one area to another? To be with their friends, because they were hot, because they didn't like the view from where they were living. I don't know. Some of the answers I get on the things that on the papers I get back sometimes are very random. And so we're going to talk more about how the new test is different. And one of the ways it might be better is that the questions are much more specific, and I feel like it's much more guided for students. Okay, so we're going to go back to this, and we're going to look at a New York State 5th grade sample question. And the first thing I want to say to you before we go over all this is I am always very skeptical when it comes to changes that are coming down, especially at the state level, because I feel like it always seems rushed. It always seems really overwhelming. And it doesn't seem like it's in the best interest of students. And I can tell you that the way the investigations have been rolled out, I personally don't agree with how they were rolled out. I feel like it left teachers with no time to get the supplies and get everything organized. It's been very stressful preparing for that. And these new assessments, we've known about them for a while, but again, it can seem really overwhelming. And when you look at these new questions, the one critique I have is that the reading level is far beyond what I feel a 5th grade or 8th grade student could handle. Most 5th or 8th graders. I could be completely off base, but that's my opinion. And, it's a lot for students to be able to, observe in the diagrams and notice and really think about. And so there are lots of things I find overwhelming. However, I would like to say from a science standpoint, I feel like the direction we're heading with these new standards is beneficial for students. And, I've tried these things in my classroom. I've done this with students. And so, I wouldn't ever, give suggestions or make comments on things that I haven't had experience with. So I just wanted you to know that it's really important that you understand that if I'm promoting something, it's because I've really tried it. And so I've shifted my teaching in the last probably 4 years to this new teaching style that's more 3-dimensional. And I have to say, we're going to talk about some of it more later at the last part of the video, but I've seen huge differences in engagement with my students, and it's really, changed the way they think in my class and wonder. And it's been awesome to see that. And the way these questions are asked is really trying to target some really good science skills and science thinking. The way they're asked, the way it's structured may not be ideal, but I really feel like even if, we don't always like to teach to tests, right? So even if students don't reach our benchmarks on these tests right in the beginning, I still feel like if you try to reach this bar on some way and not beat yourself up too much if your students don't get 4s or 3s even or 2s on this new exam, if you're trying to get them here, I feel like it's really going to benefit them as scientists, as students. It's all good. It's all good stuff. So don't get too caught up in the, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. It's too much. They just can't do it. That's where I panic when I first say things like that. And that's my first thought. But if you can kind of work through that a little bit and focus on what you can do, I feel like we'll all get through it together. Okay, so this is a lot of reading, right? And so this is a 5th grade test sample question. And so there's a paragraph for students to read, and then there's some information around the beaver. So the first thing that's different on these new tests is there are, stimuli, they're calling them, with lots of information. And so we're going to have to give students more diagrams that they have to analyze, more things that they need to focus on, pull facts out of. They need a lot more practice with this visual observation skills, and how to highlight and how to really focus on information provided to them. And so then there's some reading. With my biology students that really struggled with meeting the reading level of the Regents exam, I encourage them to draw pictures as they've read or underline or highlight. So if you're an experienced teacher, even if you're not, some of these things are like, yeah, duh. But so I'm sorry, I don't mean to say that you wouldn't know that already. It's just, I like hearing new things from other people, so that's why I'm sharing it with you. Okay, so the first question here says identify one external structure that functions to support the behavior of the beaver in its habitat. So this is different than the skunk question because they're not giving you the structure, they're asking the students to identify it and then explain how the structure supports the behavior. So I feel like the reading level of this is a little bit higher. You know, what we're asking students to do is a little less specific, so it might be more challenging to students. But if you've practiced with, like, some students may not know that skunks have claws and may not have thought about that before. So if you throw claws in the question and a student doesn't realize a skunk has a claw, as a fourth grader, you may be so caught up in that you're not able to focus on the question. So the one benefit of this being more open-ended is that if a student knows what a beaver looks like, or can even look at this picture, right? And they have things written on the diagram for you. They have thick, insulating brown fur, small eyes and ears, large, sharp front teeth. You know, it says the respiratory system allows them to stay underwater for 15 minutes. So really the benefit here is if they can pull this information out of the diagram and write it here, they're good to go. They don't need to know anything about a beaver, right? And so a lot of these new questions, the answer's on the page for them. They just need to learn how to extract it. And so that's one of the skills we're going to be working on moving forward with our students is how do we get information, you know, how do we use information that's already provided to us? Okay, and so then they provide 4 facts and they're asking which facts describe how the teeth function. So there's no one right answer, there's 2 right answers. And that's a new shift in these new questions too, is that students need to kind of get out of that habit of always thinking that I'm trying to find one right answer and that there may be 2 things that are correct that I'm looking for. So, you know, having students write in the margin, you know, true, false, or correct, incorrect, next to the choices can be helpful. Some other test taking skills like that. Okay, now these are the pages that stress me out when I see them because my 7th graders would definitely struggle with this. And so I feel like for 5th grade, this is really could be overwhelming when it's so much information, especially with shading. I feel like a lot of students look at this, they could tell you there's gray and white, but they're not really paying attention to these small little areas that are maybe not shaded. And so those are some skills they're going to need practice with, really being observant and finding similarities and differences in diagrams or, where are the changes? Okay, and then this is the real data I was talking about. So the graphs show the changing populations of beaver over about a 40-year time span in the 2 locations indicated on the map. So now we're asking students to use this map and this data together. And so they're having to kind of look at both things together. And in my mind, that's really tricky for students, right? And then the other point here that I feel like a lot of 4th graders probably don't have practice with, because my 7th graders definitely, they were just learning graphing. And so for them to be able to then, okay, if this is the peak here, we have to follow down and know that's 1980, or follow across and know what that number means. So really focusing on those skills of reading graphs is going to be really important to focus on too. And so there's another graph, and like I was saying, it's real data. It's not simplified data, and so that's something students need to get comfortable with. All right, so then it's asking, using evidence from the map and graphs which claim accurately describes that in a particular habitat, beavers sometimes survive well, less well, or cannot survive at all. Okay, so you're going to be looking at those choices and picking the one that best fits with the graph. And I feel like that's a lot, right? So you have to read this whole statement. I feel like this would be work for me to choose the right answer. So the focus to choose the right answer with pulling information out of the sentence, looking back at the graph to see if it's correct. So again, as a teacher, looking at lots of these examples and kind of finding a pattern and then figuring out how to teach students what to focus on in diagrams and highlight important parts. And then, what are we highlighting in these answer choices, and then looking back at the graph. So it's teaching students how to really analyze what's in front of them. Okay. All right, so I'm not going to go too much more into that, but we keep going, okay? That's the other thing that's different. We're still going on with this beaver cluster. So it's a lot of questions all on the same topic. And then on page 8, we get to a new cluster of questions. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's here for you. You can look through it on your own time. And if you haven't already, those sample questions. The next thing I want to do is just pull this up really quick because this was a question that I felt, so this is from Delaware, but it is a question that other assessment we had, the fourth grade on the ecosystem with the pond. So this is a question students might get now instead of that pond one. So I would encourage you on your own time to just kind of look through this sample question and see how it's much different than the pond example from the old fourth grade test. And again, you're seeing a lot of real data, you're seeing diagrams that they need to get information out of. So this will give you an idea of how that type of question might look on the new fifth grade or eighth grade assessment. Okay, and then all of these links take you to different assessment resources or examples. The one I really love, if you haven't ever seen the Wonder of Science page, I absolutely love this page. It has so many resources, so much good stuff. This guy is awesome. So he has videos, he has so much stuff here. So if you've never seen that website, definitely go there. There's assessment examples. There's a ton of stuff there for you. Okay. I know a lot of districts are using Mystery Science, so this is something I wanted to touch on quickly without taking too much time. So Mystery Science, I know a lot of teachers are using it. The activities are great. It's super engaging, but and now mine's not opening. Okay, so, but what I wanted to talk about in this video is if you're looking at Mystery Science, this was a second grade lesson that I was going to briefly touch on, but I can talk about it since my link's not working. I'll fix that. A lot of the Mystery Science assessments do not match with New York State expectations. So you really want to be careful if you're teaching using Mystery Science. You want to give students practice with these assessment questions that are similar to what the New York State exam is going to look like at the end of the year, because the assessments for Mystery Science are really open-ended. They're more linked with the old fourth grade test, and they're not, at least I know they were working on revamping some of them. So at the fifth grade level, I think they've redone a lot of them, but definitely check that and make sure that whatever curriculum you purchased, make sure those assessments really mesh well with these New York State sample questions. Okay, if you're not sure on the questions and if it's meshing well or not, this is my own thing, so it's not professional at all. It's just how I think through things. So I wanted to provide something for you. If it's helpful for you, great. If it's not, just ignore it. But I like to have specific examples for my brain to understand things. But so a lot of the old tests, we were at kind of a level 1 as far as how questions are asking students to access information. And there's not a lot of higher order thinking. So it's more just making a claim. Okay, the next step would be a level 2, and that's where we're doing more of these activities. And then a level 3, if we can get students doing more of level 3, this is our goal. So you want to, when you are building lessons, when you're looking at assessment questions, you want to try to build in as much of these level 3 activities as possible. And this is the stuff for me as a teacher that's really tough, because it's kind of exhausting, right? To help students analyze data and compare data and, connect observations to other phenomena. It's a tough skill to get students to those levels. And so, this requires a lot of practice for students, and some of them are really going to struggle with it. I mean, at least they do in my classroom. But the more exposure we can give them to these level 3 things, the better they're going to do on those state assessments. And then we have some specific examples here, because this is great that it's like general, but I need more specific for my brain. So these are some activities that I would do maybe with my 7th grade students. This would be a level 1 type activity. These are the things that, we are going to do these in our class because they're great science skills. Level 2, these are the things where we're going to take this data we collect and we're going to analyze it a little bit and talk about it. But level 3, we're going to go beyond. We're going to predict future data. We're going to say, what does this data actually tell us? Okay. We're going to make predictions or hypotheses. So we're going to relate that information to other situations or scenarios in the world around us. So you can just read through this. It's just some specific examples for me that really helps. And then the last thing I have here for you, this is, like I said, take it or leave it. But if you're not quite sure if your lesson plans are doing these 3 things, take a lesson and type in the activities that would be making a claim. type in the activities that would be supporting a claim with evidence, and then type in the activities that you would do that would have students explain their reasoning. If you're not sure if your lessons are like where they fit, reach out to me and I can help you. If that's something you want help with, no problem. Okay, and then the same thing with an assessment question. If you're giving your students an assessment and you're not sure if you are, if those questions on that assessment, and it doesn't have to be, I don't give a lot of tests or quizzes in my class. We do more work together. If you notice a little blip in the video, it's because my webcam stopped working, and so I had to mesh the videos together. I just did say video editing is my favorite thing to do. So I was talking about assessment question screening tool, and if you wanted to take assessment questions and try to figure out which parts of the question had students make a claim, support the claim with evidence, or explain their reasoning, this would be something that you could use if that helps with organizing in your brain at all. So the last thing I have for you on this portion of the slideshow is an assessment guide from New York State. So this assessment guide was something that was just released by New York State, and it answers some frequently asked questions and kind of gives an overview of what the expectations are for that new test. So that's there for you. It's the most recent document shared from the state. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is move on to unit plan resources and school-wide initiatives. I feel like the video is already almost 45 minutes, and I want to keep this to definitely under an hour, so I'm going to try to go quickly, but like I said, if you want any more information about anything, feel free to reach out to me. So the first thing I have for you is a unit plan template, and this one's organized into mystery science, but one of the important things with the new teaching styles for 3D learning, and then also with the new assessments, is that students are really going to need a lot of hands-on science experience or lab experience. And then it's also great to kind of try to bring in some field trips and maybe reinvigorate both you and the students a little bit. I know that going to new places, if we can afford to do that as a school, a lot of these when new standards drop or when new things happen, it's super overwhelming. I get really stressed out, and I just feel like, kind of adding in some different things can reinvigorate me sometimes. So the way that I structured this was mystery science, like I said, but you could put whatever your unit is here instead of the mystery science one. And then I like to, at the beginning of the year, kind of plan out, okay, how much time do I think I need for this unit? What's like my dream amount of time? And then when do I realistically feel like I can start this? And kind of map things out in chunks like this. This is how I like to organize. So if you're a new teacher and you don't have practice with this, then this might be helpful for you. But if you're experienced, then you probably don't need this. But just thought I'd share it in case it was something that could be helpful. And as teams, if you're planning as a team, sometimes a template like this is helpful to kind of share what field trips you're going to use, exploratory stations or labs you're going to do, and then what assessments you might be giving students for practice on that section. Okay. The next thing I have is a resources chart. And so I've been doing this work for about 6 years now, and I feel like everybody shares with me such awesome stuff, and I didn't want it to be just shared in an email and then disappear. So I started creating this document a long time ago with all links to so many different things. And so there is a lot of information here, but every link I have on here is, a lot of these are free resources. When I was teaching during COVID, I put a whole bunch of video links or just different people that I followed on YouTube or different social media sites. So there's so much here. I know it can be super overwhelming, but if you're feeling like you need to be reinvigorated a little bit, take a PD day or something and just scroll through some of these sites because there's some awesome stuff here. And again, there may be a link here or there that doesn't work. There's a lot, and I don't every month go through and check all these links, but, reach out again if you want more information on any of it or want to know why I put the link there or how I might use it in my classroom. Okay, I feel like pre-K and kindergarten are kind of in their own little world, right? Like things are quite a bit different. And I know that a lot of times when you click through those resources, it's like everything all at once. And so my goal was to create a resource chart, take the one I just shared with you and break it out by grade level. That was my goal. And you can see I only got as far as like pre-K kindergarten because time, right? So but this is here. So if you're a pre-K or kindergarten, when you click these links, it takes you right to the pre-K or kindergarten resource for this site. So it's faster for you and you're not getting lost trying to find your grade level in these general resources. So maybe when I retire, I'll have time to build out the rest. But for now, or if anybody wants to do that for me, I'll pay you. If you want to build out like a 3-5 grade level band or a grade 3, whatever. I really feel like I get frustrated when I go to websites and have to spend forever digging to find what I want. So some of these sites, most of them are pretty user friendly, but a lot of them are built out by grade level again. So if I can give you a specific link to your grade level, it's just a time saver. Okay. Next is accountable talk. And so these are just a couple, see, broken link. I thought I checked all these. So we'll talk about that. That was a link to a website about accountable talk, but I'll just describe it to you without the link. You can Google that and find a ton of information, but this is something that a lot of schools that downstate had been doing, and I really hadn't seen it much in our area, so I thought I would share it. But specifically for science. So teachers would choose some vocabulary that's used often in science, and through a whole school building, they would have little vocab plates or charts. So hypothesis or predict or, to whatever other words that are used a lot in science. I have a whole list of them and I'll show you in a second. So if you have those little plates with those words on them, you can put them on the student desks, and then it's just kind of a visual reminder to try to use those words more often. So claim, evidence, reasoning, those types of words. I feel like as a teacher, it would help me to remember to use that vocabulary more often with students in all of my lessons. And then it would obviously help prepare students for these science tests. Because I know a lot of you, the biggest struggle with science, you're this all sounds awesome, but time. I don't have time for this. So if that's you, reach out to me, because I have some great ways to kind of work around the time issue. I've worked with tons of different districts with different schedules. And, it takes some creative energy, but there are usually some ways to find time to squeeze in some science, or at least help prepare these students for these tests. So, accountable talk is one of those ways. If you're using that vocabulary throughout the year, throughout different subject levels, it kind of helps beef that up so they're ready for those assessments. Next is visual thinking strategies. So this is something that I feel could really support these new tests, because I was saying, looking at diagrams and pulling information off of it is so important on these new assessments, but you have to start somewhere with building those skills. And so this is one of the ways that I like to do that in my classroom. And when I started teaching high school, I was very much using a traditional teaching style. What you probably, all of you that took biology, at least if you're in my age range, not you, not all of you that are in your early 20s. I'm not talking to you. But so traditionally you teach vocabulary first, right? You would learn vocabulary. If this is a food web, you'd learn producer, consumer, herbivore, carnivore. And then you would start practicing food chains, and you'd learn the order things go, and then you'd practice it. And then your teacher would show you a food web that's all labeled, and you'd practice that. And so that's a pretty traditional way of learning about food webs and ecosystems. But now, if I was teaching food webs in middle school, I might start the whole unit with a food web at the very beginning before I teach anything. So I might not tell kids anything about ecosystems. I would definitely not teach carnivore, herbivore. I wouldn't teach any of it, nothing. First day of the lesson, I would hand out a food web like this, maybe a few different types, like an ocean one, a forest one, desert one, just to mix it up, make it more fun. And I would ask students to write down or tell me 5 facts about this picture. What do you notice? What do you wonder? What can you tell me about it? What do you think is happening? And so they're really having to pay attention to a lot of details in this picture and figure out what's going on. And so, some students are going to be like, the skunk is black and white and the grasshopper is green. And, they're not really, or they're going to be like, the mouse is going to bounce on the little links here. So, there's going to be a lot of information that's not really where you're wanting to go. It's not, but you can start driving their thinking in the correct direction. And so you will have some students maybe that really are have already learned a little bit about food webs outside of school or in a different grade level. And they'll be able to tell you, I think the giraffe's eating the tree. Or, I think that the lion is a carnivore and is only a meat eater. And so you're, keep asking them questions. If your whole class just tells you the skunk is black and white, you might say, okay, well, why is there an arrow pointing to the skunk? What do you think that means? Why do you think we have some things in the bottom and some things up here toward the top? Like, what do you notice about the things on the bottom? What do you notice about the things at the top? You know? Can you describe like what's similar between a lion and a cheetah? You know, ask them questions, get the conversation going. I mean, this might take 30 minutes and you're like, I don't have time for 30, like, I don't have 30 minutes for that. But you might be surprised at where your lesson goes after using this type of strategy. So when I shifted to this with my middle school students, I was shocked because every year I taught food webs. I cannot tell you, at least half my class, you know, midway through the unit would still reverse these arrows. They would draw them down instead of up. And I would teach it so many different ways. And I would try to like give them little tricks and tips to remember. And I always had students that would reverse the arrows. And it was so frustrating to me as a teacher. Like, why is this happening? But once I started teaching it this way and giving them this diagram first, I was shocked that so few kids reverse the arrows. You know, it was rare that kids would reverse those arrows after starting teaching it this way. And I don't know why. I don't know what the trick is. I don't know why it works. I'm just saying it did. And, you know, maybe it's because they had to really observe the picture and pay attention to it that first day and make some of their own connections. And the other thing is, once I started teaching the content and introducing vocabulary, they'd be like, oh, it was like in that picture the first day. Or they'd be like, I was right. You know, like middle schoolers especially, they love being right, or when they can prove that they like kind of won the challenge. And so, you know, just shifting your thinking to presenting diagrams differently can really make a difference. And so I won't go into this, but this is another one where I might use that same type of strategy to present information. Okay, so phenomena. If you have done any PD with the new standards, you heard this word a million bajillion times. Whenever I was in PD sessions at the state level, I thought I was in an episode of the Muppets. It was like phenomena, phenomena, phenomena. I'm like, okay, enough with phenomena. This links to a slideshow that tells you all about phenomena, what it is, and how to use it. The really short summary, anything around you is phenomena. Anything that makes you go, wow, that's cool, that's a phenomena. So, you know, the idea is to use phenomena to engage students, to get them thinking. So me presenting that food web to them that they didn't know what it was, that's phenomena. That's presenting phenomena. So it doesn't always have to be flashy and huge. It can be something really simple. Okay. Next is incremental shifts in instruction. So if you're looking for something that's really going to help you understand what the goals are for your students on these new state tests, this is the page for you. So this kind of gives you traditional instruction and where students would be. This is a level 1, and then ideal would be a level 4. So based on all of these categories, these are the skills that New York State is hoping students begin to strive for to reach that level 4. So I think I took this right from, I'm not sure where I took it from. Should probably have that link though. It's down here. There you go. There's the reference for it, but it's not mine. I didn't create it. It's just a resource that I thought would be super helpful. Okay, so like I said, I don't want to make this video any more than an hour, so I'm going to wrap it up and end. But please, again, I said this a million times, but I really mean it. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions so that I can help you. All right, this is my website. So if you click that link, it takes you to my website with information. So all of this will be posted on my website. Maybe you found it here, I don't know. But I update this frequently. At least that's my goal. I get lost sometimes in the busyness of life and I don't update it as often as I want to. But check back there, and then the shared resources. So I have a few PD sessions planned in the next couple months. And as I work with teachers, so I usually create one of these every year. This is the new one for this year. As I work with teachers, sometimes if they have time in the afternoon during my PD sessions, I ask them just to share what they know, what they have that could be helpful for others. So keep checking back to this and you'll see some resources from other teachers, kind of like a platform for a science learning community in our area. Like I said, collaboration is key. And without that, none of us can be the best teachers that we want to be. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you made it this far in the video, woohoo, thank you. All right, bye.